You don't have a phone addiction. You have a default behavior. Because if it was truly addiction alone, removing the phone would solve everything. But it doesn't. People delete apps and still come back. They set limits and still ignore them. They promise themselves just 5 minutes and somehow lose an hour or so. The problem is not the phone. The problem is what your brain does when there is nothing else guiding it. Because in the absence of a system, your brain will always choose what is easiest and right now. Scrolling is the easiest thing available to you. It requires no planning, no energy, no resistance. Just one tap and you are inside a world designed to keep you there. And here is the part most people miss. You are not choosing to scroll as often as you think. Most of the time, it is already decided before you even unlock your phone. A small moment of boredom, a slight discomfort, a pause between tasks, and your hand moves automatically. Not because you are weak, but because the path is already built so. Instead of asking how to stop scrolling, maybe the better question is this: why does your day keep leading you back to your phone without you even noticing? There is a pattern that repeats quietly throughout the day. Most people never notice it because it feels normal. It starts with something very small. A task gets slightly difficult. Your attention drops for a second, or you finish one thing and do not know what comes next. That tiny moment of uncertainty is enough. Your brain does not like that feeling. It wants clarity. It wants relief. It wants something easy to hold on to. And your phone is always there, immediate, predictable, rewarding. So, without thinking, you reach for it not as a decision, but as a reflex. You unlock it, open one app, then another. Not because you care deeply about what you see, but because your brain is searching for stimulation, something fast, something effortless, and the system is designed perfectly for that. There is no clear stopping point, no natural ending, just infinite content. Always one more swipe, one more refresh, one more small hit of novelty. It feels harmless in the moment, but what is actually happening is training. Every time you escape boredom, instantly, your brain learns that boredom is something to avoid. Every time you interrupt your focus, your brain learns that focus is not necessary. So over time, the baseline changes. Silence feels uncomfortable, deep work feels heavy, and anything that does not give immediate feedback starts to feel pointless. This is why reading a book feels harder than scrolling. Why working for 30 minutes feels exhausting, while scrolling for 2 hours feels effortless. It is not about effort. It is about conditioning. You have trained your brain to expect constant input, constant novelty, constant reward. And when that expectation is not met, your brain pushes you back to what it knows will satisfy it quickly. So the issue is not that you lack discipline. Issue is that your environment keeps reinforcing the same loop cue. Discomfort. Reach for the phone. Short relief, repeat, and the more it repeats, the more automatic it becomes until one day you realize you are not really choosing anymore. You are just following a path that has been reinforced too many times to question. The shift did not come from deleting apps or forcing myself to be disciplined. It came from a quieter realization. I was not failing to focus. I was succeeding at following the easiest path available to me. That sounds small, but it changes everything, because if behavior follows what is easy, then motivation becomes less important than design. Every time I picked up my phone, it was not a battle of willpower. It was a predictable outcome. The phone was within reach, instantly rewarding, and required no thinking, while everything else asked for effort, clarity, and patience. So, of course, I kept choosing it, not because I wanted to waste time, but because my environment made that the default. And once I saw that, I stopped blaming myself. I started looking at the structure instead. Why is distraction always one step away? Why does focus require 10 steps to begin? Why does my day have no clear starting point for deep work? The more I looked, the more obvious it became. I did not need more discipline. I needed fewer decisions. Because every time you rely on deciding in the moment, you are already late. The environment has already nudged you somewhere. So the real shift was this: stop trying to Win against distraction. Start making distraction lose by default if picking up your phone requires zero effort and focusing requires planning, setup, and energy. Then the outcome is already decided before you even begin. But if you reverse that, even slightly, everything starts to change not instantly, but consistently, and consistency is what rewires behavior. That was the moment things became clear. I was not trying to remove a bad habit. I was redesigning the path my brain follows every single day. I did not try to fix everything at once. I focused on one idea, make the wrong action harder and the right action easier, not extreme, not perfect. Just enough to interrupt autopilot. The first thing I changed was friction. I removed every distracting app from my home screen. Not deleted, just hidden. So now opening them required intention. I had to search, wait, and in that small delay something interesting happened. I started asking the question, do I actually want this right now most of the time? The answer was no. That 1 second pause was enough to break the loop. Then I turned off almost all notifications. Not because they are bad, but because each one is a decision trigger. And the more triggers you have, the more often you get pulled away without choosing. Silence created space to stay with what I was already doing. I also changed my screen to grayscale. Sounds insignificant, but color is stimulation. Color pulls attention. Without it, the phone felt dull, less alive, less urgent. And that was exactly the point. I was not trying to make my phone disappear. I was making it less attractive than real life. That was step 1. Step 2 was replacement. Because removing something leaves a gap, and your brain will try to fill it if you do not choose what replaces it. The old habit will return. So I did not quit stimulation. I upgraded. Instead of short, chaotic content, I switched to longer, slower content. Instead of endless scrolling, I read a few pages, not for hours, just enough to keep my mind engaged. The goal was not discipline. It was direction. Give the brain something slightly better, not something perfect. Over time, better becomes normal. Then came step 3, a simple rule: no mindless scrolling during the day. Not a complex system, not 10 habits, just one line. If I notice myself scrolling without purpose, I stop. No guilt, no punishment, just awareness. Because awareness repeated is what breaks automatic behavior. At first, I failed constantly. I would catch myself 5 minutes in, sometimes 10, but that did not matter. What mattered was noticing, because every time you notice, you interrupt. The pattern in every interruption weakens it. This system is not about control. It is about design. You are not forcing yourself to change. You are making the old behavior harder to continue and the new behavior easier to begin. Small shifts, but they change the direction of the entire day. At first, nothing felt impressive. There was no sudden clarity, no burst of motivation, no dramatic moment where everything changed. In fact, the first few days felt slightly uncomfortable. Silence felt longer, tasks felt slower, and the urge to check my phone was still there, just quieter, but persistent. But then something subtle started happening. The space between impulses began to grow. Before, the moment I felt bored, I reacted instantly. Now there was a small gap, just enough to notice, just enough to choose, and that gap is where everything changes. Because once you can see the impulse, you are no longer inside it. You can let it pass or act differently. Over time, focus stopped feeling like effort, not because I forced it, but because I stopped breaking it every few minutes. Attention became more stable. I could stay with one task longer without needing constant stimulation, and the work itself started to feel less heavy, not easier. Just less interrupted. Sleep improved in a quiet way. I was not overstimulated late at night. My mind was not racing from hours of scrolling, so rest became deeper, more natural. And during the day, I felt less scattered, not because I was doing more, but because I was doing fewer things with more presence. That changed everything. I stopped measuring my day by how much I completed and started noticing how I experienced it: less rushing, less switching, less noise, more clarity, more control, more calm. The most important shift was this: I stopped feeling like I was constantly behind. Because when your attention is fragmented, everything feels incomplete. But when your attention is steady, even small progress feels enough. This is what consistency actually looks like, not intense bursts of effort, but small, repeatable actions that no longer fight against your environment. You are not pushing yourself every day. You are simply following a path that now supports you, and over time, that path becomes who you are. You don't need to remove your phone from your life. You need to remove the part where it decides for you, because the real problem was never the screen. It was the lack of intention behind how you used it. And intention does not come from motivation. It comes from structure, from what is easy, from what is visible, from what repeats without effort. So before you try to be more disciplined, look at your environment. Look at what your hands do when you are not thinking. Look at where your attention goes when there is nothing forcing it. That is your real system. If that system leads you back to distraction again and again, then the answer is not to try harder. It is to redesign what happens by default. You don't need a new personality. You need a new path, one where focus is easier to start and distraction is slightly harder to continue. If you have ever felt stuck in that loop, just type system below, not as a trend, but as a reminder that you are not broken. Your system just needs an update. And if you want to keep refining one small part of your life at a time, you can subscribe. We keep it simple here, no pressure, no extremes. Just small changes that actually last, because your life will not change in a single moment, but a single well-designed day repeated enough times will quietly change everything.